Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're exploring a really fascinating connection how global food security efforts profoundly reshaped the very wine in your glass. We're going to delve into something called the Green Revolution and its surprising, maybe even far reaching impact on viticulture, wine growing and winemaking. You might think of wine as, well, a timeless tradition steeped in ancient practices,
Right.
but a massive agricultural movement from the mid 20th century, actually designed to feed a rapidly growing world, fundamentally transformed everything. Everything from how grapes are cultivated to the very style of wine we drink today. Our mission is to unpack this transformation, explore its unexpected consequences, and see how the wine world is adapting now for the future.
It really is quite a journey, from a global crisis to, well, surprising abundance, and then crucially, to a new awareness of the path forward. We'll see how groundbreaking science and technology were applying to agriculture on a grand scale, and how those big ideas trickle down to every vineyard, every winery, leading to incredible innovations, but also some significant unintended consequences that, frankly, the industry is still grappling with today.
Okay, so let's set the scene first. What was viticulture actually like before this green revolution even began? Can you paint us a picture? A time when wine growing was maybe truly a dance with nature, for better or worse?
Well, before the Green Revolution, viticulture was profoundly shaped by, centuries of empirical knowledge. Hands-on learning, basically. Practices were incredibly manual. Think precise pruning techniques, right? Honed by generations of just watching and doing. Natural fertilization using local animal manure, compost, and manual weeding, sometimes even helped by sheep grazing between the rows. Pretty clever ecological solutions. Irrigation was rudimentary, really heavily dependent on rainfall, so vineyards were highly vulnerable to the weather. And viticulturists, they relied on carefully selecting local vine seedlings, choosing plants that naturally thrived right there in their specific spot. And that's what really fostered those unique regional wine identities we still cherish today.
That sounds almost idyllic in a way, but you hinted at vulnerability. What were the
Mhm.
biggest challenges these traditional growers faced?
Oh, the challenges were monumental, often devastating. Vineyards lived under this constant threat of pests and diseases,
Hmm.
phylloxera, for instance, in the 19th century. It nearly wiped out European vineyards, attacked the roots. The only solution, and it was ingenious, was grafting European vines onto resistant American rootstocks.
Yeah.
Gave them a bulletproof base,
So a
essentially.
technological fix even back then.
Exactly. And beyond that, you had fungal diseases like
Mm.
mildew, powdery mildew, constant enemies, required tireless vigilance. Productivity itself was inherently low
Mm.
and highly variable. It really depended on having good weather and no major outbreaks. Viticulture was extremely susceptible to climate extremes, late frosts, hailstorms, droughts, too much rain. Any of those could just decimate a harvest.
Ooh,
Yeah, it made the whole thing incredibly unpredictable.
risky.
You were looking at modest yields and you weren't even sure you'd get those.
Okay, so you have this traditional high-risk world. Now let's zoom out. The bigger picture that ignited the Green Revolution. What was the actual driving force?
The context was absolutely crucial. We're talking the post-Second World War era, marked by widespread food scarcity and a really rapidly growing global population, especially across Asia, Africa, Latin America, traditional agriculture. It just couldn't keep pace. It couldn't feed everyone. So the Green Revolution emerged as a direct response to this crisis. The aim was to combat chronic hunger, malnutrition, to drastically increase agricultural productivity, ensure national food security, and fundamentally modernize agriculture. Take it from rudimentary practices to something scientific, technologically advanced.
And who are the key figures driving this? I feel like I've heard a name. Borlaug.
Absolutely. Norman Borlaug,
Yeah.
an American agronomist, won the Nobel Peace Prize for it.
Yeah.
He's widely seen as a key architect. His pioneering work, especially developing these disease-resistant, high-yielding wheat varieties in Mexico and India, it was instrumental. It promised to just break the limits of traditional production. It was meant to literally change the world.
That's a huge promise. So how did they actually achieve it? What were the core strategies, the pillars of this Green Revolution?
It was a really comprehensive strategy, yeah. Built on 5 main pillars, basically. First, developing high-yielding varieties, or HYVs, of seeds, those miracle seeds for staples like wheat and rice. But also, critically for our story, the propagation of specific clones of grapevines, designed for more vigor, disease resistance, and significantly higher yields.
Okay, higher yields. Makes sense.
What else? Second, intensive use of chemical fertilizers. Precision-formulated synthetics, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. These became vital for feeding those hungry high-yield varieties, allowed for massive production you just couldn't get with organic methods alone.
Right, need the fuel for the engine.
Exactly. Third, pesticides. Herbicides for weeds, insecticides for pests, fungicides for diseases like mildew and powdery mildew in the vineyards. They were seen as crucial for protecting the crops, minimizing those devastating losses we talked about.
Okay. Seeds, fertilizer, pesticides.
Fourth, improved irrigation. Large-scale, more efficient systems like sprinklers and later drip irrigation. These ensured a constant, reliable water supply, which meant you could expand farming into previously unsuitable lands.
And the fifth.
Mechanization. The widespread use of tractors, combined harvesters, automated sprayers, it dramatically increased efficiency, reduced the need for manual labor, and really transformed agriculture into a capital-intensive industry.
So these massive changes, starting with staple crops, how did they specifically hit the world of wine? Let's start right in the vineyard. What changed there?
The impacts were profound. First off, you saw an exponential increase in vineyard productivity, just unprecedented yields per hectare. Suddenly, grape production was far more economically viable at scale, and harvest became simpler.
Easier and cheaper, presumably.
In many ways, yes. Then, pest and disease management. Systemic fungicides, insecticides. They gave growers control they'd never had before over things like mildew, powdery mildew, leafhoppers. Losses dropped drastically, predictability went way up. But this also brought concerns about chemical residues, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. What about feeding the vines?
That's where synthetic fertilizers came in. They allowed for precise feeding, boosting vine vigor. But over time, that often led to soil degradation, loss of organic matter, increased dependency on buying these inputs, disruption of natural soil fertility cycles.
Unintended consequences starting to appear.
Definitely. And the selection of clones and varieties, it focused heavily on productivity and resistance, which led to greater vineyard uniformity. Easier to manage, yes, but it raised questions about genetic diversity and, crucially for wine lovers, the dilution of terroir expression. That sense of place.
Right, if every vine is the same.
Exactly. And finally, mechanization, mechanical harvesting, automated spraying, even some mechanical pruning. Revolutionized operations, cut labor needs significantly, increased efficiency. But it also changed rural employment dynamics quite dramatically.
That's fascinating how a global need for food security translated so directly, almost technically, to the vineyard. But what about after the harvest? How did this green revolution thinking, this philosophy, ripple into the winemaking itself in the cellar?
Oh, it extended directly into the cellar. Fundamentally influenced enology, the science of winemaking, and the very identity of the wines, the drive for uniform, predictably mature grapes. It led, perhaps inevitably, to a kind of homogenization of wine styles.
Homogenization, meaning wine started tasting more alike.
In some ways, yeah, there was a big push for perfect, defect-free wines, often marked by really exuberant fruit notes, which ironically sometimes masked the distinct characteristics of the terroir. Wines became more clean, predictable, microbiological control was easier, vintage variation was reduced. But that sometimes came at the cost of that spontaneous complexity, the interesting stuff that happens with more natural microbial interactions.
So cleaner, maybe more consistent, but potentially less interesting.
That's the debate. And the intensive use of inputs didn't stop at the vineyard gate. In the cellar, too, selected yeasts, enzymes, exogenous tannins added. This raised a really crucial debate about the impact on terroir expression. Many argue these methods can mask the intrinsic character of the place. The soil, climate, local culture, diluting the unique identity in the glass.
That increased efficiency certainly sounds like a win on one hand, maybe for the producer's bottom line initially. But this homogenization you mentioned, was that universally welcomed back then, or did it spark immediate debate about the soul of wine?
It definitely sparked debate. Maybe not immediately at the mass consumer level, where consistency was often seen as a good thing. Less risk in buying a bottle. But among traditional winemakers, purists, writers, there was a growing unease, a feeling that something was being lost. The Green Revolution's pursuit of predictable perfection, ironically, maybe threatened to strip wine of its most cherished quality, its unique story, its connection to a specific place. It forced a fundamental reconsideration of what quality truly means in a bottle. Is it just flawlessness, or is it character, even with imperfections?
A real identity crisis for wine, in a way. So what did this all mean for the wider world, the socioeconomic landscape, the environment surrounding wine?
Well, the transformations had vast socioeconomic implications. The sheer scale and cost of all the high-tech inputs, the mechanization, it favored the large companies, big players, which led to a concentration of production. Small family producers. They often couldn't compete, couldn't afford the investment.
So consolidation.
Exactly. Many abandoned viticulture altogether. The increased volume and optimized processes, yes, they made wine more accessible globally, put it on more tables, but it also put immense pressure on prices and therefore on producer profitability, especially for the smaller guys.
And the jobs.
Mechanization drastically reduced the need for rural labor. That contributed to rural to urban migration, changing the whole social fabric in traditional wine regions. And this standardization, this increased production, it fueled the globalization of wine. You started seeing similar styles produced everywhere, sometimes really at the expense of unique regional identity and diversity.
And environmentally, this intensive approach must have left a pretty significant footprint.
Oh, indeed. There was a significant environmental cost. We saw widespread soil degradation, loss of organic matter, compaction from heavy machinery, erosion, the massive application of pesticides, chemical fertilizers, led to water and soil contamination, residues leaching into rivers, streams, groundwater, impacting aquatic life, raising health concerns.
Not good.
Not good at all. And the reliance on monoculture, just growing one type of vine plus the synthetic chemicals, caused a severe loss of biodiversity, wiped out native plants, insects like pollinators, beneficial soil microorganisms. The whole ecosystem got simpler and weaker. Plus, the production and transport of all these energy-intensive inputs contributed significantly to greenhouse gas emissions, added to wine's carbon footprint. Ultimately, it led to a profound imbalance in the vineyard ecosystem, made it increasingly dependent on continuous external interventions just to keep going.
Wow, that paints a really challenging picture, especially thinking long term. Were there early warnings about these environmental costs, or did it take a while for people to really notice the cumulative effects?
I think for many, these issues became truly apparent as the long-term effects accumulated, year after year of the same practices. Soil getting harder, needing more fertilizer for the same yield, seeing fewer birds or insects. This growing dissatisfaction, this evidence, spurred a really significant critical awakening. Among producers, consumers, academics, people started questioning the model, and this led to a robust movement towards sustainability, seeking to redefine viticulture and winemaking with more ethical, more ecologically responsible approaches, a kind of counter-revolution.
Okay, so what does this counter-revolution actually look like in practice? Can you tell us about some of these new or perhaps rediscovered approaches? Let's start with organic.
Absolutely. So organic viticulture is a fundamental shift. It categorically rejects all synthetic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, artificial fertilizers, none of that. Its core philosophy is about building and maintaining a living, healthy soil. That's the foundation. Practices include organic fertilization, using well-rotted manure, compost, planting cover crops, or green manures, and natural pest and disease management, using biological controls like introducing beneficial insects, manual or mechanical weeding, and choosing grape varieties that are naturally more resistant. And crucially, credibility is ensured by rigorous third-party certifications, so you know they're actually following the rules.
It's not without challenges, right?
No, definitely not. Challenges include higher manual labor costs, often, and greater risks in difficult weather years because you don't have those quick chemical fixes in your toolkit.
Right. And then there's biodynamics. I hear that's even more holistic. How does that work?
That's right. Biodynamic viticulture goes beyond organic. It views the vineyard as a self-sufficient living organism, one that's intrinsically connected to the cosmos, actually, based on Rudolf Steiner's teachings from the 1920s. The aim is to create a truly vibrant ecosystem to produce superior quality grapes and wines that genuinely express their terroir, their place. Key practices include strict adherence to a biodynamic calendar. It factors in moon phases, planetary positions to guide vineyard activities like pruning, planting, harvesting.
So like astrology for grapes.
It's a bit more complex than that, but it does consider celestial influences. For example, there are specific root days considered ideal for pruning and soil work, leaf days for vegetative growth. And crucially, fruit days are often seen as the most auspicious for harvest. The idea is the energy is concentrated in the fruit then, enhancing aromas and flavors.
Interesting. What else is unique?
They use unique biodynamic preparations. Maybe you've heard of Preparation 500 horn manure.
Vaguely. Involves cow horns.
It does. Cow manure fermented in a buried cow horn. It's aimed at stimulating soil life and root development when sprayed on the soil. Or Preparation 501 horn silica. Finely ground quartz, also fermented in a horn, but sprayed on the leaves to enhance photosynthesis and disease resistance. There are also specific compost preparations made from medicinal plants like yarrow and chamomile to activate the compost pile itself. The whole approach actively fosters diversity, creating ecological corridors, planting diverse cover crops, sometimes integrating animals like sheep or chickens for natural weed and pest control.
And there are certifications for this too.
Yes, reputable ones like Demeter and Biodiven. They ensure rigorous adherence, often even more demanding than standard organic certifications. Producers often report benefits like healthier, more resilient vines, and wines with enhanced purity, complexity, maybe even a certain energy. Wines that truly express their terroir.
Okay, so organic, biodynamic. But beyond those, I've heard so much buzz recently about natural wines. How do they fit into this picture? What makes them different?
Right, natural and low-intervention wines, they really emerged from this desire for ultimate purity and authenticity. The goal is minimizing interference, both in the vineyard, which is usually farmed organically or biodynamically, and in the cellar. They primarily use indigenous yeasts for fermentation, spontaneous fermentation, relying on the natural microflora that are already on the grapes and in the cellar environment.
So no adding packaged yeast.
Generally, no. And they feature minimal or often no added sulfites. Sulfites are preservatives, antioxidants. Limiting them allows for what proponents feel is a more vibrant, pure expression of the fruit, though this is a highly debated point in the industry.
I bet.
They also typically avoid aggressive filtration and clarification, meaning the wines might be lightly cloudy or have sediment. This is often seen as a sign of authenticity, not a flaw. The big challenge here, though, is the lack of a single, universally accepted global definition or certification. Leads to a lot of debate about what truly counts as natural wine.
So it's more of a philosophy than a strict rule book sometimes.
You could say that. It's a spectrum of practices, really.
Yeah. Okay, so we have these specific movements, organic, biodynamic, natural. Is there a broader umbrella idea like sustainable viticulture? What does that cover?
Yes, absolutely. Sustainable viticulture is a broader, more adaptive framework. It aims to balance environmental, economic, and social performance for the long haul. It's often less about strict yes or no prohibitions, like inorganic, and more about optimizing practices for longevity and minimizing negative impacts. Environmentally, it focuses on things like intelligent water management, precision irrigation, rainwater harvesting, monitoring soil moisture, energy efficiency using renewables like solar panels, low consumption equipment, reducing synthetic inputs by prioritizing biological methods first, using integrated pest management, protecting biodiversity, creating habitats, planting native species, promoting soil microbial life, circular waste management, composting, pruning waste, recycling bottles, and mitigating climate change, reducing the carbon footprint of logistics, using lighter packaging, sequestering carbon in the soil.
So it's a more holistic, big picture view.
Exactly. And it includes the economic and social sides, too. Economically, ensuring long-term viability through profitability, market resilience, innovation. Socially, promoting fair labor conditions, community development, transparency, a responsible supply chain. Many regions now have their own certification systems, like Terroir in France, Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand, Lodi rules in California, each tailored to their specific local context and challenges.
Okay, that makes sense. It's adaptable. So looking ahead, what does the future hold for wine production? How do we continue to balance that need for productivity, which hasn't gone away, with this renewed push for sustainability and authenticity?
Yeah, the future is really all about finding that critical balance and embracing innovation, but maybe a different kind of innovation. We're seeing rapid advancements in what we could call green technologies. Drones, for example, equipped with sophisticated sensors, they offer incredible precision in vineyard monitoring, identifying stress, nutrient deficiencies, disease outbreaks really early for targeted interventions, not just blanket spraying.
Using tech to be less invasive?
Precisely. Robotics, too. Redefining field practices with things like automated pruning, more sophisticated mechanical harvesting, improving efficiency and worker safety. And biotechnology is playing a big role. Developing new disease-resistant grapevine varieties, you might hear the term PIWIs, that stands for fungus-resistant varieties in German. Also developing vines more tolerant to drought and heat. These can significantly reduce the need for chemical inputs and water.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How science, which initially pushed towards standardization during the Green Revolution, is now being harnessed to re-emphasize uniqueness and reduce impact. How do these new technologies actually help us get back to the soul of wine, the terroir?
Well, it's exactly because these technologies allow for such precise understanding and management. Instead of overwhelming the natural system, you can work with it more subtly. You can understand the specific needs of a tiny block of vines or even individual vines and respond accordingly. This allows those unique characteristics of the place, the soil variations, the microclimate, to actually shine through, rather than being masked by broad, uniform treatments. So there's this strong return to the valorization of terroir,
Yeah.
that complex idea, the interplay of climate, soil, topography, human influence. It's being re-embraced as the heart and soul of wine. Consumers and producers alike are increasingly seeking wines that tell a story, you know, a story of their unique origin. It's a direct counterpoint to that homogenization we saw in the Green Revolution era.
That makes perfect sense. It's about letting the place speak. But considering all this and thinking about the future, what do you see as the single most urgent challenge facing viticulture today? And how is the industry trying to adapt?
Oh, without a doubt, the most urgent challenge is climate change. Rising global temperatures are leading to earlier bud break, earlier harvest dates. That changes the whole balance of sugar, acidity, phenolic ripeness in the grapes. Sometimes things ripen too fast or unevenly. Unpredictable rainfall patterns, prolonged droughts followed by intense storms that affects water availability increases disease risk. And extreme weather events, late frosts, brutal heat waves, damaging hail, they're becoming more frequent, more severe.
So, what can growers even do? It sounds overwhelming.
It is challenging, but the industry is adapting. It has to, using multifaceted strategies. Choosing different grapevine varieties, ones better suited to warmer, drier conditions, or maybe those PIWIs resistant to new diseases moving into the area. Adopting strategic canopy management that means carefully managing the leaves and shoots to control sun exposure, maybe provide more shade, or improve airflow. Adjusting harvest dates, obviously, sometimes picking earlier to retain acidity. Exploring new wine regions altogether, moving to higher altitudes or cooler latitudes further from the equator.
We're seeing vineyards pop up in places you wouldn't have imagined 50 years ago. Exactly.
Right.
And investing heavily in precision irrigation systems, water conservation techniques, also embracing those regenerative agricultural practices, things like cover cropping, reduced tillage to build healthier soil that holds water better and sequesters carbon. It's all connected.
So bringing it all together, what does this mean for the people who actually make and appreciate wine today? The winemakers, the sommeliers, or even just us, the everyday wine enthusiasts enjoying a glass. Well, I think the role of the modern enologist, the winemaker, is changing. They're not just a technical expert anymore. They have to be a guardian of terroir, a visionary of sustainability, a blend of scientist and artist, really. Their role now is to produce wines that express the truth of their origin, but to do it ethically, sustainably. And from sommelier's perspective, or anyone who appreciates wine, it's increasingly seen as this reflection of its environment, its creators, the whole philosophy behind its production. The Green Revolution, maybe unintentionally, taught us a huge lesson. That abundance, deficiency, it can't come at the cost of the wine's essential character or the planet's health. The future of wine, I believe, lies in celebrating that harmony between science and nature, embracing diversity, ensuring authenticity, allowing wines to continue telling their unique stories for generations to come.
What a journey we've taken. From a critical post-war necessity focused on feeding the world to a revolution that completely reshaped how we grow grapes and make wine. The Green Revolution left this absolutely undeniable mark, both beneficial and, as we've seen, quite challenging. Perhaps the most profound insight for me from looking at the Green Revolution's ripple effect on wine is how solutions designed for one huge problem feeding the world can inadvertently redefine and even risk the very essence of something deeply cultural, like wine. It's really a testament, isn't it, to the fact that progress isn't always a straight line. And sometimes the path forward involves, well, a thoughtful return to fundamental principles, but maybe armed with new knowledge.
That's beautifully put, and it makes it an incredibly exciting time to be a wine enthusiast, actually. As you savor your next glass, maybe consider what stories will our wines tell in the future? As they continue to adapt to this changing world, this growing global consciousness about sustainability, will we fully embrace the messy, complex, wonderful meaning of terroir? Or will that ghost of the Green Revolution, the pursuit of perfect consistency, still whisper in the background? Because this shift towards sustainability, it isn't just a trend. It feels like the very foundation upon which the magic of wine will need to stand to continue to thrive.